Good morning and welcome to Scottish Labour's Women's Manifesto launch. Can I first of all say a huge thank you to the Scottish Labour Women's Committee and our Chair, Cathy Peaty, and our Vice Chair, Karen Whitefield, for their tremendous work working alongside Scottish Labour women across the country to put forward this bold and ambitious programme for what Labour wants to prioritise over the next 5 years. And I'm also delighted to be joined by Jackie Baillie, our Deputy Leader, and also by our women candidates across the country. This is a manifesto written by women for women across the whole of Scotland. And throughout this election campaign, I've been talking about a national recovery. And that national recovery will only work and only truly genuinely be a recovery for everyone if we recognise that there were inbuilt structural inequalities even before this pandemic, but they have been exacerbated by the pandemic. One of those examples is the inbuilt inequalities that women face every single day across our society, in every sector of our society and every part of our country. And if we are going to have a national recovery coming through this Parliament, if we are going to make sure it's a recovery that works for everyone, it must be one that finally tackles those inbuilt inequalities that women face every day in their local community, in their local workplace, and institutions across the country. And that's why I'm proud to be launching this manifesto today alongside Scottish Labour women. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Jackie Baillie.
Thank you very much, Anas. And I'm delighted that you have all joined us this morning for the launch of the Scottish Labour Women's Manifesto, because we know that women have been at the centre of the pandemic. They have been the social care workers, the nurses who have, looked after us throughout the pandemic. They are principally the people who are still on furlough. And also, they are the people who have had increased caring responsibilities as a result of the pandemic. So thank you, all of you, for all that you've done. But you also need to be at the centre of the recovery, because Close the Gap tell us that if we use all the talents and skills and abilities of women, then what we have is an economic boost of something like £17 billion to our economy. Now, that is something we cannot afford to ignore. So we will be investing almost £1 billion in the biggest job creation package that the Parliament and devolution have ever seen. Women are very much at the heart of that. We will invest in a national care service. We will invest in childcare, increasing the availability, but also the number of people working there. And we've made clear our ambition is to ensure that every social care worker in Scotland is paid £15 per hour, because we value the work that you do and we need to reward you appropriately. Scottish Labour will also bring forward an Equal Pay Scotland Act, because we want to make sure that work is fair and you get paid well for the jobs that you do. That will end discrimination in the public sector in pay. And finally, before I hand over to the talent that is all our female candidates, let me touch on health for a minute. Because we know that screening programmes for breast cancer, for cervical cancer, they have had to cancel appointments have been delayed. We cannot afford to allow that to continue, so we will boost activity, catch up programmes for screening to ensure that you get the health advice and support that you need. We will also invest in rapid diagnostic centres so you get results quickly, within 2 weeks, because your health matters to Scottish Labour. Finally, we need to look at what we do in the future to promote women's health and to make sure that we're tackling conditions that affect women, like, for example, endometriosis. So I want to pay tribute in particular to Monica Lennon, whose idea it was to have a women's health fund, to do research into that in the future. And of course, it was Monica that made us all very proud when she brought before the Parliament a members' bill to allow free period products in Scotland, a world-beating bill that will make a huge difference. And I have to say to you, if you elect more Scottish Labour women to the Scottish Parliament, these are the kind of things they will do to improve the rights of women across Scotland. It now gives me great pleasure to ask Claire Baker to speak to us.
And thank you, Cathy, and I'm delighted to be at the launch this morning. I want to focus on a few highlights of our education offer, but first I would like to recognise the huge effort of parents and to be frank, mothers, and home educating for most of the past year, women have carried the majority of the homeschooling, often in addition to home working, and it raises the debate about the value of women's work and their role in the home. For the next generation, equality in education is so important. No girl or woman should be excluded from any profession, and many industries are looking at the talent and skills of women, and we need to increase opportunities for all girls to explore and excel in a wide range of subjects at school. It's important we bring an end to the restrictions on subject choice and address the gender gap in STEM subjects, both through education and in careers. I'm also delighted by the proposal for an open college based on the model of the Open University, a legacy of Jimmy Lee, who was one of the first women elected to the UK Parliament. The success of Open University deserves replication, and offering a similar model for the college education, increasing the opportunity to learn part-time. It's also great that to support families in education, we will work with partners to increase affordable and accessible on-care childcare facilities for staff and students. I know the transformational power of education and the opportunities it opens up for women and girls to be independent, self-sufficient, and play a full part in society. And I really welcome Labour's commitment to delivering this in the next Scottish Parliament.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you for covering the manifesto around education and sport. I'm now going to hand over to our housing spokesperson, Pauline McNeill, who has helped ensure that we have the boldest and most radical housing offer in the history of devolution too. So, Pauline McNeill.
With amazing women candidates across Scotland. Housing is essential to our recovery plan, and Scottish Labour's ambitious plan for housing will make a huge difference to the lives of women and all ordinary people who need a warm, affordable home. When we see that over 150,000 people are on social housing waiting lists and 17,000 children, women's lives would benefit enormously by having the choices of affordable rents and a quality home. So single parents are predominantly women, and one of the poorest groups living in poverty, and they need these choices. Children in the private rented sector are living in relative poverty. So we need fair rents and changing the law that I tried to bring about in the Parliament. And believe me, I will lead on this early to the next Parliament. The number of families living in unsuitable temporary accommodation is a national scandal. But the impact on women is it means that living in temporary accommodation means that you might not have facilities. And the impact on children is massive. And learn in accommodation, which is completely unsuitable. So building more homes will make a huge difference to those families. But according to Women's Aid, the biggest reason for homelessness in women is domestic abuse. The Labour women in Parliament led on key changes to the law to protect women, and we will continue that work with women's organisations. Young people fear housing with an increase in private tenancies for the age group of those aged between 24 and 34. And for young women, the continuation of the pay gap means that unless we have housing policy that supports low-paid women workers to own their own homes or have low rent in the social sector, then inequality becomes generational for women. Labour wants to end that inequality. Women's lives will be better for putting housing centre stage in the next Scottish Parliament. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much, Pauline. And can I now ask Rhoda Grant to speak to us?
Thank you, Jackie. And it's a pleasure to be with the launch of the Scottish Labour Women's Manifesto. We all know that violence against were truly hoped this would not happen, but we live in a society where women and girls from a very early age learn to take steps to protect themselves, and that is not right. We should be free to live our lives without fear. We should be safe to walk home alone. We should be safe at work, even in a nightclub. Especially, we should be safe in our own homes. This isn't a woman's problem, it's a problem with some men, and we must take steps to hold them to account. Conviction and reporting rates for rape and sexual assault are unacceptable, and we will deal with that. We'll set up specialist courts to deal with sexual offences. We'll review corroboration and how it is used in crime. rape and sexual abuse crimes that happen in private where there is no witness, and will ensure that we fund support services such as women's aid refuges, rape and rape crisis, and we will train people offenders. We will also pilot space safety audits to ensure community planning works for women. Too often, our towns and cities are planned by and for men, designed to eliminate all violence against women and to create a Scotland where women are truly equal.
Thank you, Rhoda. And we're now going to go to our fantastic candidate in the south of Scotland, Carol Mockin.
So pleased to speak to the party on mental health. In recent weeks, I've learned so much from speaking to people across the mental health sector with lived experience. Poor mental health is an important public health challenge, and significant mental health inequalities exist in Scotland, both in terms of deprivation and also gender. Many studies support women, often younger women, of mental health issues. And of course, we cannot ignore the COVID pandemic has led to sharp rise in mental health problems. And this is why I'm so pleased to be promoting Labour's ambitions around improving for increasing resources and of course promoting good mental well-being. Our recovery plan manifesto is so exciting. The link to ensure tackle root causes of but the Women's Manifesto also explicitly allows us to speak about women's mental health and what we need to do to prioritise and improve women's life chances. It allows us to acknowledge changes in patterns that women's mental health need disorders, and it allows us to make commitments specific to women, for example, provide resources to women experiencing postnatal illness. Now, as you know, women's health front plan, I think also in the Women's Manifesto. And finally, just one last point today's Scottish Labour's commitment to women's representation. The rise in threats, both verbally and on social media, towards women representing their communities are growing concern. Scottish Labour in the Manifesto concrete commitments to protect women's well-being, including mental well-being. And I'm sure those will be welcomed by women, hopefully encourage them to consider today with a voice to raise these really critically important issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol, and I'm delighted you are a member of Scottish Labour's health team. We now move on to Katie Clark, who is standing for us in the west of Scotland. Katie.
Thank you very much, Jackie. I'm here, as you know, committed to considering women across government, and that is also the case in relation to international work. Scotland's international budget is, of course, small, but it's done very important work in the country, and it's vital that women and girls are at the centre of that work, in particular work around violence against women, female genital mutilation. We're committed to making sure that Scotland has a loud voice on the international stage. We need to put the commitment to clean water up front. That affects the whole community. But at the time of an international pandemic, we also need to make the case very, very strongly that we all have a responsibility to make sure that the whole world gets vaccinated to keep us all safe. In the year of the COP26, Labour is committed to increasing the Justice Fund because it's absolutely essential that we have the loudest possible voice. And we look forward to the UN International Conference in Scotland and to putting the case as to why we all have a responsibility to make sure that we address the issues which affect all of the world. At the UK level, we of course are facing big cuts in our international aid budgets. We're campaigning strongly against them. But our focus will remain very strongly on ensuring that we have the strongest voice, that we put trade justice and climate justice at the heart of international work, and that we recognise that women and girls have to be central in addressing the massive inequalities in power and wealth that exist across the world, and we will be shouting loud on their behalf.
Thank you, Katie. Really powerfully demonstrating that our values don't just go to a border, but are actually international in terms of working for the protection rights of women right around the world. I'm so proud of the number of young women candidates we have across the country too, so I'm delighted to hand over now to Maddie Kirkman.
Thanks, Vanessa. Good morning, everybody. I'm speaking to the part of our manifesto that tackles poverty this morning. And I think it's clear that there are still really deep class inequalities across Scotland. And for too long, the Scottish Government has focused on trying to tackle the symptoms of that class inequality, like the attainment gap and like health inequalities, without any real willingness to look at what's causing those underlying structural problems that keep people trapped on lower incomes. So 1 in 4 children in Scotland are still growing up in poverty. You're not going to tackle child poverty until you tackle families poverty. You're not going to tackle families poverty until we tackle workers poverty. Which is why I'm so delighted to see so many references to increasing pay and terms and conditions for women throughout this manifesto, and particularly an emphasis on unionised workplaces and the role that trade unions can play in protecting women's rights in the workplace and improving women's incomes. But there's also a role for the social security system in delivering for people, for ensuring that their human rights are protected, and supporting people who face additional costs, like lone parents and carers and disabled people like me. As a young disabled woman, as someone who grew up in social housing, as someone who's been discriminated against in the workplace and who's had to go to tribunal to access social security that I'm eligible for, I'm really delighted to see this focus on addressing poverty and addressing that intersect between class and gender that I think Scottish Labour can really address. So I'm delighted to see the Women's Manifesto launch today and be taking it out to voters across Edinburgh Central, Lothian and Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maddie. Can we now move to Sarah Boyack, please?
Jackie, as we come out of the pandemic, it's absolutely vital that women have the jobs and the training opportunities to use their skills and talents for the future. I started off in what was a male-dominated profession, working first as a town planner and then as a lecturer. But over the years, we've seen changes with new opportunities opening up for women, but we've got so much more to do, and the next Parliament's the opportunity to deliver. And we need to make sure the progress we've made to give women new career opportunities don't go into reverse, and we urgently need to help the thousands of women who've lost their jobs during the pandemic. So that's why our Scottish Labour plans to use the government's £11 billion procurement programme to make sure we deliver fairer jobs in Scotland, to end zero-hours contracts, with our pipeline of training and jobs across the country is so important. And I think Scottish Labour has exciting plans, and our new jobs recovery proposals would create more jobs than in the history of the Scottish Parliament. We'd have thousands of new jobs and training opportunities for women, to involve them in helping tackle fuel poverty, new jobs to create green buses, and the new renewables infrastructure that we need to tackle emergency. And that also means more opportunities too for women in research and development. And I think our plans for 10,000 jobs in a new civilian conservation corps to restore Scotland's natural environment is exciting. But we need to make sure we would deliver so we see decent terms and conditions for women workers, whatever sector they work in, and better career opportunities so they have the chance to develop and not miss out if they choose to take career breaks for childcare or care. And we know lots of women have lost their jobs during the pandemic. So I think our plans, new Scottish skills benefit and additional income support are going to be absolutely crucial to give women the opportunities to enable them to get into new jobs and to use their skills to the max. So I'm really proud of our Scottish Labour Women's Manifesto. It would transform life for women right across Scotland. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Sarah. And it's not just Labour women in Parliament that makes a huge difference. Labour women in councils across the country also make a huge difference too. And that's why I'm delighted to welcome Sullivan, who's been one of those fantastic Labour women in local government, and I hope a strong Labour woman in the next Parliament too. Kirsty.
Thank you very much. And as many of you know, I'm also the candidate for the Liverpool constituency. But as well as being a councillor and a candidate, I'm also a mum of 3 primary school age kids. And I understand all too well the juggling act that many parents face
have they tried to manage the demands of life at home and at work? In the past year, they've been brought into sharp focus with kids at home for months on end. Some of us don't have family support nearby, and many women have been locked in the workplace due to the cost of childcare. Returning to work for many has just become simply unaffordable, and for others, the inflexibility of childcare hours has made it really difficult to pick up the reins again. And the obstacles faced by lone parents are even greater. These problems can also have far-reaching consequences in terms of career progression and the gender pay gap, where women continue to be left behind. So I'm really happy today to see that the Women's Manifesto recognises the challenges of childcare and offers practical solutions in pledging to implement all age, all year, wraparound, affordable early year services that's focused on the needs of the child, but also with the flexibility that families need. It also seeks a year-on-year increase with the eventual ambition of offering 50 hours a week for every child. And it also takes into account the specific needs of lone parents, recognising that there is no one-size-fits-all. But also understands the value that childcare has in the growth sector, providing invaluable infrastructure to allow women to return to the workplace and contribute to both the local and national economic recovery. And not only that, in establishing the core training funds to subsidise the cost of entering, training or completing continuing professional development in this sector, women have a valued, recognised and supported career route in childcare. So for me, I am really delighted to see that this manifesto reflects the needs of children and families of all shapes and sizes, of women in the workplace and of childcare as a profession, and that it brings into the light of the often unseen contribution that women are making in our society today.
Thank you very much, Kirstine, and thank you for everything that you do. Now to another powerhouse of energy in local government, a councillor for us in Glasgow City Council, and hopefully an MSP in Parliament too, Eva Murray.
Thanks, Jackie, and it's great to be here virtually this morning launching our brilliant Women's Manifesto. And I'm proud to be the Scottish candidate for Glasgow Abbey Land at this election, but like you said, I've also been a councillor in Glasgow. And throughout these years, I've seen what the decimation of local government and the subsequent devastation of essential services have done to our communities and the impact that has on women across our towns, villages and cities. Whether it's cuts to social care budgets for older women than men, and where we know the workforce is predominantly women, meaning that any cut to services is adding even further pressure on women across our country. Or the cuts which have seen third sector organisations which have changed lives in wards like mine across the country forced to scale back services or close completely, bringing uncertainty to organisations, citizen advice bureaus, advice centres and local community centres. All provide vital services, and we know for the most part women are more likely to use them than men. But these cuts to community amenities and resources continue. In my city just this week, communities across Glasgow have found out that many of their museums, libraries, sports facilities are either earmarked for closure or do not have a date for reopening. These places provide opportunity, information, and are often a safe space for many women and families. This is the reality of year after year cuts passed down from the SNP in Holland, and our friends, family and neighbours deserve so much better. I've mentioned a few areas today, but ultimately it's clear that any cut to local government anywhere in the country impacts women. We need MSPs who will fight so that local government finally gets its fair share, that respects our communities and wants to empower them further, that has a plan to ensure caring roles are valued, and that acknowledges the unique set of challenges women face every day and vows to tackle them. If this pandemic taught us anything, it's how resilient and strong our communities are. They stepped up to support us, and now we must repay them. We need more Labour women in Parliament focused on a national recovery plan that will not only unite our country, but rebuild our community. This Women's Manifesto launching today gives us a blueprint to make that happen.
Thank you, Eva, and thank you to all of our fantastic speakers today, setting out some of the ideas, just some of the ideas in our Women's Manifesto today. Labour women inspire me every single day, and it is the honour of my life to lead the Scottish Labour Party as a result. And like Jackie said right at the start, we owe a huge thank you to all those frontline workers, disproportionately women frontline workers, who have helped us get through this pandemic, disproportionately more likely to work in the NHS, disproportionately more likely to work in social care, disproportionately more likely to work in retail, women who kept our country going in the most difficult of years, knowing they were risking taking the virus back home to their own families. But we can't just thank you. We can't just come out and applaud you once a week on a Thursday like we did through the height of the pandemic. We've got to make sure we recognise and reward you too. That's why we can't go back to the failed model pre-COVID. That's why we've got to address head-on the structural inequalities that existed before COVID and have been exacerbated by COVID. And that's why we have a manifesto programme led by women, written by women, for women across Scotland at the heart of our campaign in this election. And we want it to be at the heart of the next Parliament too. So let's together work on making sure that the next 5 years focus on that national recovery so we can come through the most horrific of years and come through that and build a stronger, fairer nation together. Agree with us? Then use both votes for Labour on the 6th of May and let's start that hard work of having a more equal society and a more equal Scotland. Thank you.